Hi, everyone. My name is Boris Rappaport, and I'm with ArchIT, and we're a technology solutions provider for architecture, design, and engineering firms. And I'm doing this presentation because in the last 2 months, as people were forced to work remotely, we've been getting a lot of questions and helping our clients, and also just anybody who had questions, helping to answer them. So I figured we'd put something together with the AAA to kind of spread the message um, and hopefully answer some of the questions you may have had but um, never got the answers to from somewhere else. So this presentation, I mean, I do have a presentation and a PowerPoint, but I like this format to be more informal. We'll use the presentation as kind of the guidelines for what we're going to talk about, but I'd like the participants to raise their hands and ask questions in the chat to make sure that we have a dialogue as opposed to just me talking to myself here, especially because I can't hear any of you, so or see. Um, I'll just start going through it, but yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to just post them in the chat. And when we do post them in the chat, let's preface them with some question marks so it's easier for me to identify um, the question is actually the line in the chat is actually a question. All right, so let's move on. So here are a few things that I'm going to try and cover today. And basically, I mean, we've been working from home for the last 2 months, but nobody really knows how long more this is going to continue and how many people will still be working from home 2 months from now, 5 months from now, or a year from now. So what I wanted to talk about first is how to be effective and what you need from the technology standpoint to effectively work from home. Then we'll talk about some of the tools architecture firms use and your firm may be using um, to, for your day-to-day operations. And then we'll also talk about how to access those tools remotely in more effective manner. And we'll talk about some of the security um, risks that have been identified in the last few months as people work more and more from their homes. So again, if you have any questions about these, feel free to put them in chat. So I'm gonna throw up a poll right here and basically ask a question of what you feel is your biggest technology challenge today with everything that's been going on. So Chris, can you? All right, good. If you guys can answer, that would be great.
Okay, so just about everybody has answered. 22% have said that the project's file access is the biggest technical challenge. 67% said slow performance. 0 said increased security concerns, and 11% said other.
Awesome. And if you guys want to specify what that other is in the chat, that would be great as well. So we can maybe cover that as one of the topics in this conversation. But yeah, I mean, those have the project file access and the slow performance. I think the slow performance has always been the challenge here, especially for for design firms where all of your files are pretty big in size, and it's not always easy to work on them with optimal performance as you would have when they're in an office and you were connected in the office. So we'll cover some of that of um, how to better set up your internet connection here to achieve better performance. So just as I thought, again, these were some of the things we're going to talk about. Okay, so let's focus first on the internet and how to better set up your home. Um, so what constitutes a good internet connection is basically you need to have a connection that has um, pretty substantial upload speed so that you can easily transfer your files not only from your office to your computer, but also from your computer back to the office, or um, anything, not just files, but any data that goes from your home computer and connects back either to the office or to the cloud service that you use, something like Box, Dropbox, Google Drive, OneDrive. Um, Substantial upload bandwidth is required. Now, the problem with our current setup for most home internets, and I'm not saying this is for everybody, but for a lot of home internet circuits, they're designed for streaming, right? So they're designed to provide you with content, which means downloads, and they're not designed for uploads. They're not designed for you to send the data back to whoever it is you want to send back to. So that's why performance has been the biggest issue so far, is because um, the internet providers did not design their circuits to accommodate work from home. They're mostly designed for streaming and downloading. So again, kind of touching back on what a good internet circuit is, you want to make sure that you can maximize your upload speeds. And it'll be nice to have something that's around at least 5 megabits per second in upload. Download speed is not really a problem because you usually get a lot of that included in your package. But talk to your service provider, see if you can get see what your upload speed is now. Run a speed test. You can go to speedtest.net and get some information on that as well. So you can get a screenshot, the information that it looks like in a screenshot, where you can look at your download speed and upload speed. You also can look at the ping, which is basically a delay, and you want that to be less than 20 milliseconds. Typically for a cable circuit or a fiber circuit, it'll be within those parameters. If you're running DSL, it'll be a lot higher because DSL is not necessarily, again, it's not necessarily designed for fast working. It's designed more for browsing on the internet. So yeah, so those are kind of things you want to pay attention to identify any issues with your current home internet setup. So here's some things that you can do to possibly improve performance. And the very first thing is restart your router. So if you have a router that's provided by your service provider, whether it's Comcast or AT&T, the recommendation is to restart it every few days. And the reason for it is, again, these routers are working differently, that they're designed to work. So they are being pushed harder than they were designed to be pushed. And it's better to have it, to restart it, to kind of reset it and make sure that it maintains its performance so that, you get the optimal connectivity and optimal connection speeds. Now, the next suggestion I would have is to work with your provider and see if you can get a router upgrade. Usually what happens is you lease the routers from your service providers and you pay every month, but they're not so good about reaching out to you and telling you that there's an upgrade available for your router. So some people that I know have routers for 4 or 5 years that they've never upgraded, and because of that, their connection is much slower than it could have been. So definitely talk to a service provider if you can, and see if you can get an upgraded piece of equipment in your house. Number 3 here is disabling Wi-Fi on your provider's router. So a lot of times what happens is AT&T and Comcast, they both, and you can kind of see that in the screenshot here, they both provide free Wi-Fi, and they use your bandwidth to provide that Wi-Fi to the public. So this is broadcast from the same device. This is your home router that broadcasts your internal security network and then also the Xfinity Wi-Fi public. So what I suggest, but you do, is turn off Wi-Fi altogether on your router and purchase just a separate router for your internal Wi-Fi. That way, other people can connect to your network and take some of your bandwidth. And then the last piece is also, if you can, and if that's available in your house, or if you can run a cable, try to use wired connection. Usually wired, even though we've been using wireless for 20 years now, wired is still more stable, especially for high performance applications like your Revit and CAD or ArchiCAD. So let's go back to this real quick, and can we throw up another poll about what's your current connection at home for internet?
Okay, the results are in. 0 for fiber, 83% for cable, 17% for DSL, and 0 for other.
Okay. And then I haven't seen any questions come in. Do you guys have any questions about the home internet setup? How you can improve it? Anything along those lines? I'm hoping. All right, well, if there's no questions, and I'm hoping it's not a technical difficulty, then we'll move on to the next section. And we'll talk a little bit about the professional tools that you guys use. And then this will bring us into publishing those tools for remote access and talking about some of the remote access methodology that you can use for your firm. So my first question, there's also a poll that we have for this. And this poll is going to ask about different software that you may be using in your firm. Chris, can we get that poll up? Awesome.
Okay, it looks like all the results are in. 83% said Revit. Oh, the numbers just Numbers just changed. 71% said Revit, 29% said AutoCAD only with no Revit, and 0 for the others.
Okay, interesting. All right, awesome. Okay, so great that you guys using Autodesk tools. I'm sure there's some, maybe not in your audience, but um, some of your peers, they're using ArchiCAD, and also for PDF editing, most likely Bluebeam is being used as well, but I don't know if we had a multiple choice on this question. So anyway, so as we mentioned, some of the tools um, include Revit, AutoCAD, Bluebeam, but those are your professional tools. In addition to professional tools, we also have communication tools. And those communication tools, obviously email is the biggest one, but then we have video conferencing, something like Zoom, GoToMeeting that we're doing right now, Microsoft Teams, and things like that. We also have phone, which is still a very good communication tool for talking to people if you want to quickly dial somebody. Then the next piece here is collaboration tools. So I know a lot of you may be using Slack. Also, if you're in the Revit universe, you're probably using BIM 360 in some way to collaborate with your consultants and your clients. And then Microsoft Teams is kind of a combination of Slack and Zoom, which allows you to communicate internally to your team, but also communicate externally through video conferencing with your clients as well. And as we move on to operations tools, I'm sure a lot of you are using something either like Deltek Vision for accounting and time tracking and project management, or using Archie Office, which is a more basic version of that, but it still allows you to do all the billing and accounting inside there. And then there's HR tools, sales and marketing tools, like CRMs and contact management and things like that. So all of these are, make up your technology stack for your firm. So the biggest question is how do we now make sure that people have access to all these tools when they're at home, and they can still do their daily tasks as efficiently as possible. So we're going to take a look at some of the remote access methodologies that are available, and hopefully provide good information on that. And again, I'd like to see questions. I don't know if that's a technical issue that for some reason I'm not seeing anything. Let me take a look here.
Boris, we do have one question.
Okay, go ahead.
The question is, can you get commercial office speeds for a home office?
Yes, you can. Well, as always, there's an asterisk to that. So you'd want to check with your service provider if they're able to provide business grade internet in your area. So if you're using Comcast right now, for example, as a cable provider, call Comcast Business and see if they're able to provide a business service in your area. I've seen a few customers that have been able to do that, which is great, because the business circuit allows you to have better bandwidth ratios, right? Download versus upload. It costs a little more a month, but it's well worth it to do that. So yeah, the first thing would be to talk to your provider. Also, Sonic has been very aggressive in the East Bay and on the peninsula, getting their service in, and they're running a fiber service, which is symmetric. They give you the same amount of download and upload, and it doesn't cost that much. I think it costs a little more than a standard Comcast cable circuit. So it's also very good value. So again, go to Sonic's website and see if the service is available in your area. I know that San Mateo is definitely covered by now, and I think they've expanded into Palo Alto as well. But I'm not sure if they've gone too far south, but it'll be definitely something that you can check out. Very good question. Thank you for that. Yeah, Chris, I'm not seeing the questions come in, so I will need to rely on you to tell me what those are. Okay, so going to the next step here is basically we're going to start talking about some of the remote access methodologies, and there are basically three ways you can access your network, and one of those ways is unsecure and not recommended to be doing at any time. But I've seen some people, especially 2 months ago, as as there was kind of this emergency mode, we need to get everybody to work from home, do the first unsecure method, which is, we've been advising everybody to avoid. So hopefully you're not doing that at your firm. And what that means is you're basically opening up all your systems to the internet so that anybody on the internet can access them. That is not something that we want to do. We want to focus on the two secure methods. And one of those methods is VPN, and the other one is remote control. And we will talk about those further in the next slides. But I'd like to see if we can throw up a poll for the current remote access methodology you guys are using. Chris, do we have that? Awesome.
Okay, so the results seem to be in 33% for VPN, 33% for remote control, 14% for both, 14% for other.
Okay, great. And again, if somebody wants to say what that other is, put it in the chat. Question to the staff, I think the window is called. All right, so moving on to our next. So we'll talk about the VPN as a connectivity method first. And what this stands for, so VPN stands for Virtual Private Network. And what it does is it makes your computer virtually become a part of your office network. So if you kind of see the diagram here, there is this blue dotted line, which is your VPN tunnel. So VPN creates a secure tunnel for you to transfer data between your computer and your office network. And your computer has full access to your office network. So it makes it seem like you're fully on the network, even though you're remote. So what happens with VPN is you're basically like you would on your office network, you're transferring full files back and forth. So if you need to open a large Revit model or a model that has many links, it'll take longer because it'll take time to transfer that model to your computer first, and then it'll take time to set up all of those links and get that data transferred to your computer as well. And then every time you update the model and sync it back to Central, it'll take time to get all of that data synced back and so on. And same thing happens, if you're using any type of other software. If you have a large document or a large PDF that you're trying to open, it's a full file transfer to your computer. and then you edit it, and when you save it, it's a full transfer back. So that's how the basic VPN works. So some of the drawbacks of VPN is that there's additional security concerns because your computer acts as part of the network. So you want to make sure that you're using a company provided computer, or if you're using a home computer, you have similar tools, security tools that your company installs for your work computers as well, like antivirus, URL filtering, and additional things, so that you don't bring any bad um, software or viruses onto your network. And then, as we talked about, performance may suffer because you're opening full files and transferring full files back and forth, right? So those are the pros and cons of the VPN. Now for our next remote access methodology, which is called remote control, we'll talk about how that looks. So remote control can be done through a VPN tunnel or through a third-party provider, and we'll talk a little more further in other slides. But basically, the way remote control works is your computer only sends the inputs and the outputs. So every time you click on a mouse or you type a key, it sends that to your office computer. And then that office computer communicates to the server. But that communication happens locally, so that the only thing that gets transferred back and forth is not full files, but it's just the mouse clicks and video output. So it takes up a lot less bandwidth to do it this way. So you will get better performance, especially on a circuit that may not be as designed for upload or have big upload speeds. Definitely remote control would be a better solution to improve performance. Now there's some drawbacks of remote control as well, and we can talk about those here. So again, the pros are better low bandwidth usage, higher performance, and also it's more secure because your computer is not actually a part of the network. It just sends the clicks back and forth. But the cons are it requires two computers, right? One at home and one in your office. And also your work computer always has to be on for you to connect to it remotely. You can't shut it down, because if you shut it down, you'll have to go to the office to turn it back on. So there are a few remote control methods that are available, and by default, most people set up Microsoft RDP because that's included as part of a Windows setup. Now, if you're not using Windows, if you're using Mac, then there are other tools that are available. Apple has a remote support or remote desktop tool as well, but it takes a little more time to set up and configure that properly. So usually, if you want to run a remote control tool with Apple, you use a third-party provider like TeamViewer, GoToMyPC, or VNC for that matter. So the Microsoft RDP was great about it. The performance is pretty good, and it's included with your Windows license, so it's basically free for you. But it does have to be set up in a secure manner. You can't just expose your Office workstation to the internet. You have to either use a VPN and then use Microsoft RDP on top of it, or set up an RDP server so that that connection can be securely proxied to your work computer. And then, as I talked about, there are other third-party tools. So these are not natively supported by either Microsoft or Apple, but you basically pay for the service, you download the plugin, you install it on your Office computer, and then you can access the website from home and connect to your computer that way. I've heard some things recently that some of these providers were having some struggles with maintaining performance just because so many people switched over. But it's still I mean, it's still a good solution for a smaller firm. If you have just a couple people, you pay $40 per seat per month, and get your people connected that way. If you're a larger organization and you want to use the remote control method, you'd want to look at deploying Microsoft RDP, because outside of just the initial cost of implementation, there's no other costs associated with it. Any questions on those?
We don't have any questions so far.
Okay. All right, so now we'll move on to some collaboration tools and communication tools. So as I mentioned before, most likely you're already using some of these tools, whether it's BIM 360 for Autodesk or BIM Cloud for for ArchiCAD, or Bluebeam Studio to do to collaborate through Bluebeam, and PDF editing in real time with either your consultants or the client or whoever needs to review your drawings, like a DSA. And then there's also Dropbox, OneDrive, and G Drive to store and share documents outside of your office, again, with your clients or consultants. Now, as far as communication goes, there are tools for internal communication like Microsoft Teams and Slack, and then there's tools for external communication with their client like Zoom, Hangouts, and Skype.
Hey, Boris, I have a question about this. Is Google Drive and all of those other Dropbox things like that, are they pretty safe, secure? Do you know if they get hacked a lot?
Well,
sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
no. And you're not, but as always, the answer is it depends. And it depends on the type of service that you have. So Google Drive has a free service, but also has a service as part of G Suite. And that's a paid service, right? So if you're using G Suite, then you can set a lot more secure permissions on any files that you have stored, and you can do a lot more in terms of security. And same thing with Dropbox. If you're using free version, you don't really get to control anything in terms of security. But if you're using a version that is paid and specifically designed for business, there's a lot more options for you, and that way you can make things more secure. Do they get hacked a lot? Everything gets hacked, but obviously these companies, have invested a lot more money and time into security with that understanding. So it's probably more secure than having those files on premise, in your office on your server.
Thank you.
So I hope that answers it. All right, so if there's no other questions about this, I'm going to my next slide. And so this slide is about communication and some of the communication tools we can use. And this one is about internal communication. So it's focused on Microsoft Teams, but it can apply to Slack as well. And there are different people prefer different tools, but they work in a similar way. So Slack and Microsoft Teams are kind of similar in a way where you can have messaging between your team members internally. So for Microsoft Teams, the pro of Microsoft Teams over other products is that they include both the internal messaging, but also video conferencing features in one package, right? So you don't have to have any integrations or use any other tools. You can just use Microsoft Teams for everything that you need. Also, if you're in the Microsoft universe, it fully integrates with other Microsoft products like Office 365. So you can easily share documents between your internal team members. You can set up, workflows and email flows to more easily get communications on projects. And then it just it also works with your email to where you can get notifications either through email, but also direct email into Teams, so you can again better track your project emails. So what we've seen, the way Teams usually get set up is you either do it by project. So if you're a smaller office, you would probably do it by project. But if you're a larger firm, outside of doing it by project, you also set up teams for internal departments like marketing, accounting, finance, and so on. And it allows for those departments to communicate and share information between the members much easier. One of the cool features is the mention feature. So if you're just posting and you want to get somebody's attention, you would do a mention of them, and they would get a notification on their either mobile device if they have Teams installed, or it'll pop up on their laptop if they're using a laptop or a desktop. So that gets their attention, and they can reply to you much faster. What else? So the search feature is really cool. So the reason why we prefer using Teams for all of the internal communication as opposed to using email is that it's much easier to search, and the search is much more intuitive. So you can search everything in one place, including files, emails, and any other things that you've put into Teams. So if you had, for example, if you had a meeting inside of Teams, you can take notes right there inside of Teams, and then you can search those notes if you needed to find some information. So very good for client meetings, and also allows to not only take notes, but record the meetings as well, and then transcribe them, so you can search it that way. And then as far as accessibility, it's accessible across all devices, including mobile, and any type of desktop or laptop. Any questions on Teams?
There's no questions, but there is one comment that
Sure.
About going back to, I can't open it now. Another option about the internet strength and download and upload speed is to have a dedicated line, one for home and one for your home office. It was just a comment.
Yeah, that's a great option. Definitely a great option. As long as you can spare, the expense, that would be awesome. And I think it's well worth it and a great value to have a separate line. So thank you for that, whoever made that comment. All right, so the next slide is Slack. So I mentioned Slack a little bit in the previous slide because, again, they're very similar to Teams. And the only reason I put Teams first is because it has some additional integration, has some additional features that Slack may not, but Slack makes up for all of that with all of the integrations that it has into other apps, like Zoom and Asana. And I mean, if there's an app out there that you use, most likely Slack has an integration for it. So again, it's very similar to Teams, where you can set up channels either by project or by department, and communicate to all your internal users that way. Basically share information internally in electronic format. And it's kind of, I think the biggest advantage of both of these tools, they're less formal than an email. So usually when I get a Slack message or a Teams message, I don't think about like all the formalities of an email and how to respond to that. I usually just provide the information. And I've seen that throughout in our client base, where it's a lot easier to get the information that way as opposed to sending the email. Again, you can search for everything, files, emails, and more. As I mentioned, many integrations. It'll integrate with any other online tools that you use, most likely. And also accessible across all of the devices, mobile, web, and laptop, desktop. Okay, so now that we've talked about some of the internal communication tools you can use and the best ways to set those up, here's some of the external communication tools and client communication. Again, email is probably your biggest one, but I think email right now is kind of what the fax was 20 years ago. It's time to think about expanding the communication strategies to lower the use of email and implement some of these additional technologies so we can make the communications easier and also more effective um, for our businesses. So for the client communication, using any one of these tools will allow you to provide more information. Well, let me ask a question, and if you guys want to answer it, then put in a comment. I mean, who's using video conferencing right now to communicate with your clients? I'm hoping it's everybody, but if you guys can make some comments, that would be great. And I'll just wait for a minute for you guys to do that, and then we'll move on. Do we get anything, Chris?
One person just respond right now. Says doing video conferencing on a daily basis with clients.
Awesome. We'd like to hear that. That's perfect. So then that person probably knows all the benefits, but I'm just going to say it anyway. Again, what this will allow you to do is you can share your screen and share your drawings in real time and explain them to your clients, just like you would in a face-to-face meeting, which is great. Much easier to do than sending emails back and forth. And then you can answer your questions right away there as well. You can also use the whiteboard functionality to brainstorm if there's anything that, if you're in the early stages of the design, or if you're, there's a change that your clients feel needs to be made, it's much easier to kind of draw out on a whiteboard inside one of these apps and then get that implemented. And then the last feature, which I like to do, but you want to make sure your clients knows, is record the meetings. And that helps me a lot when I'm on a client call, is that that way I can pay attention to what my client is saying and not just sit there taking notes. And then I can go back and review the recording for anything that I might have missed, right? So it's really a good note-taking feature to just get the meeting recorded, and then you can do transcriptions with it and search and do all other kind of cool stuff. But the biggest benefit of this feature is just remembering what people talked about if you forget. All right, so that was kind of the focus on the tools that we can use. Now I want to talk a little bit about cybersecurity. I know people said that something they don't think about as the biggest challenge and maybe not care as much, but I'd like to tell everybody that we should care because if we don't, then there are a lot of bad things that can happen to us and our businesses. So obviously, the more we use technology, especially in the newer ways like we're doing right now, the bigger the risk footprint that we're exposing our business to, right? So we want to talk about some basic cybersecurity hygiene and some risk mitigation that we can do because FBI has been warning everybody that these cybersecurity threats have increased exponentially in the last 2 months. So we want to be not only prepared, but also kind of a little bit proactive in making sure that we can keep our businesses and our data and everything we do for our clients safe and secure. So I'm going to start with phishing scams. So there's been a lot of new phishing scams, an exponential increase. A lot of those have to do with um, financial assistance for small businesses. So there's the bad guys, are capitalizing on the fact that the SBA kind of dropped the ball on the whole paycheck protection and some other loans that they were offering, and they're sending out emails to say, hey, apply for a PPP loan with us. Here's a link. Click on this link, fill out your information. And a lot of people are falling for that and filling out their personal information, their business account numbers, and things like that, and not really checking if this is a valid email, um, or that the site actually belongs to the institution that it poses to be at. So there's been a lot of that. So advice here is, if you don't expect an email, think twice before you open it or click on any links. Try to do some other checking in the background. Also, even if an email comes from a person that you know but you didn't expect it, it could also be a virus or a phishing scam that person just got hacked as well, right? So you want to be careful when getting emails that you don't expect. And I know it's hard, especially for business owners who are doing their own sales, because we always expect to get some incoming inquiry about a new project or things like that. But just be careful, especially if an email contains a link or an attachment. Just be careful when opening, and putting some technologies in place, like a good antivirus, a good URL filtering solution, a good email antivirus solution will also help in blocking some of those for you as well. So any questions on that?
We don't have any questions at this time.
Okay, good. All right, so next, and this presentation has been around for about a month and a half. So Zoom bombing, at the time I put this together, at the time I put this together, Zoom bombing was a huge issue. I mean, it still is, in a sense, something that we need to be aware of, but Zoom has done a pretty good job of mitigating a lot of these risks, which also made it less easier to use, and kind of put it back on a par with other tools like GoToMeeting and Microsoft Teams as well. I think the biggest feature of Zoom was the ease of use, but that also meant that it wasn't as secure as this tool needed to be. So just to remind everybody, so Zoom bombing was something where people would have a meeting, kind of like we're having right now, but it would be more of a open meeting, whether they have it internally in their company or a one-on-one with a client, and then somebody would just show up inside of that meeting and start doing some stuff, right? Either screaming, doing some pranks, or the worst is when people were throwing out racial slurs and other type of inappropriate behavior. So what Zoom went ahead and did is they basically by default enabled every meeting to have a password, and that's a function that you can turn on and off, but you'd want to keep that function on because you don't want anybody from outside that doesn't have a password be able to access your meetings and create those issues for you. All right, so any questions on Zoom bombing?
Nobody's entered a question.
Okay, cool. All right, so on this topic, lastly, I just want to remind everybody of some basic cybersecurity hygiene. I mean, we're getting reminded every day that we need to wash our hands, and we need to wear masks when going outside. So this goes along those lines. It's not only keeping our physical self healthy and safe, but also keeping our business and our data healthy and safe. So we want to make sure that we always use complex passwords. And the standards for complex passwords has evolved recently. I mean, it used to be that, an 8-character password with some complexity in it was good. Nowadays, I think the best practice is 12 characters, and it must include a capital letter, a number, and a special character. So that would be something that's considered a complex password. So I would encourage everybody to think about the passwords they currently use and try to see if they can change that to a more secure password. Now, I know changing passwords is tough, but there are tools out there that make it easier for you, like electronic password managers and password vaults, OneLogin, LastPass, Dashlane will all store your passwords and make it easier for you to retrieve those passwords and enter it into any tools that you're using. So try to use the electronic password vaults if you can. Change your passwords. That would be, a great thing in a long way to make sure that your systems are secure. Again, we talked about email. Don't open emails you're not expecting. I think there was a study done that 87% of all the phishing attacks are initiated by, person opening an email. Basically, we can put as much technology outside or inside, as much technology around this to prevent this from happening. But in the end, it all rests with the judgment of the person who gets the email. So I urge you to think about these things when you get an unexpected email and just think twice about opening it. Make sure your home computers and your office computers are kept up to date. Make sure all the updates are always getting installed. That way you can prevent some of the latest security risks that are out there. And again, if you're using VPN, that would really be very important. Is making sure everything is up to date on your computer, so that you don't bring any unwanted bad things from your home computer into your corporate network. And then, if at all possible, or if you're using tools that can have this enabled, try to use two-factor authentication for anything, including your bank accounts, your email. I think your email would be the most important one, because if somebody can gain access to your email, most of the time, this is where all of the password resets go. So if somebody has access to your email, they may be able to gain access to your bank account and other things that they shouldn't have access to. All right, any questions on this so far?
No one has entered any questions.
Okay. All right, how much time do we have, Chris?
We have 5 more minutes.
Okay, so I wanted to talk about some of these things, but I think we're gonna stop there, because that covers most of the technology part of the conversation, and this conversation were more about some personal challenges that we can experience as business owners, which I found out, and I'm sure you guys are dealing with day to day. But since we're running out of time, we're gonna limit it to the technical portion for right now. If you guys want to follow up, we can do separate chat around the business aspects of it. And then we also have the AA Silicon Valley Practice Leadership Committee, where we cover some of these challenges as well. So you guys can join our committee meetings to share yours and kind of learn more about what other business owners are doing in the community. So I'm going to stop here. Any questions on anything we've talked about in the previous slides?
No responses so far.
Okay, all right. So here's my contact information on the screen here. If you guys ever have any questions about improving either your remote access as we're working from home or some additional technology challenges that you may be facing, feel free at any time to shoot me an email or give us a call, and we'll be happy to provide any answers you may be looking for. I think I'm gonna say goodbye now. So thank you very much for attending this webinar. I really appreciate it. I'm hoping that it was valuable and we've provided some good information for you guys. And as I mentioned, feel free to send any questions my way. Thank you very much, and everybody have a great day.
Thank you, Boris. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.